Longer. I'm your host, Bill Borton. I have a special guest this week that I've been looking forward to having on the show for quite some time now. Jamie Hopkins is co-director of the New York Life Center for Retirement Income and associate professor of taxation at the American College. He's also a regular contributor to Forbes. Back in January, I met Jamie personally when we were in the studio to do an interview about what the Wall Street Journal got wrong with long-term care insurance. And that article has since had over 24,000 views by people from Forbes, watching Forbes online. Several years ago, Jamie and his co-director, Dave Littell, identified 18 risks that people face in retirement. They also created a retirement awareness survey or literacy survey that was first put out in 2014 and then again in 2017. The results were shocking, to me at least, but really not surprising. And as a result, Jamie was inspired to write this book, Rewirement. Rewiring the Way You Think About Retirement. It just came out and it's available on Amazon. And I'm sure Jamie wouldn't mind if you bought it. So, Jamie, welcome to Live Better Longer.
Bill, thanks for having me on.
So, explain to me a little bit about how you were inspired to write the book.
Yeah, so some of the background you talked about, we've been teaching retirement income planning at the American College now in the RICP program really since 2012. So this idea of rewirement has been around for a while in my vocabulary, but I really got inspired to move this forward when we did that literacy quiz that you talked about. And so we surveyed 1,000 Americans near retirement or in retirement about different retirement income issues, so long-term care planning, housing, safe withdrawal strategies. And as you said, what we found out was shocking but not surprising, that most Americans don't have the knowledge or the skill set really to do this planning by themselves, that most Americans failed this, what we considered, kind of a basic to medium literacy quiz about issues you'd need to know, and they failed it almost across the board. Now, you did see some groups that did better, but generally speaking, Americans weren't prepared for this. Actually, the first round of the quiz, out of 1,000 people, we didn't have a single person get an A, kind of 90% and above. So that was shocking. And on the flip side, everyone said they were very knowledgeable, right? Mm-hmm. So almost the whole group was like extremely or very knowledgeable in retirement income planning. So there's a big misconception there between your own knowledge and your actual applied knowledge. And so I thought it was very important then to talk about the way that we need to change how we think. Now that doesn't necessarily mean every consumer needs to go out and learn about income planning, but it needs that they really need to recognize that they don't have the skill for that they have behavioral biases and kind of misconceptions that are holding them back. So that's when you go out, you get an advisor. That's perfectly fine. I don't know much about fixing cars. I don't try to learn that. I hire somebody who has that skill set.
Mm-hmm. So most Americans understand accumulation. Mm-hmm. They have a broker, they have a financial planner of some kind. They could be a registered representative or they could be an RIA, a fiduciary. But the whole process of decumulation, or turning what you've accumulated into income that hopefully you don't outlive, along with Social Security, and if you're fortunate enough to have a pension, there's a whole lot more to it. There's a lot of moving parts. And most financial advisors don't really understand what I call giving the money back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of advisors don't want to either, right? Well, you've built a system where you're saving money and you've accumulated a number, and the advisor and the consumer, right, there's a hesitation to spend assets down. Because mm-hmm. once you're spending assets down, that starts to become permanent, right? Mm-hmm. Which is why retirement income planning is really so much more challenging than saving for retirement. Mm-hmm. Because bad decisions, running out of money is hard to recover from at that point, right? If you run out of money at 85 and you're still alive, it's not like you can go back to work easily and get a new job and just start generating new revenue. So the decisions there are kind of finite in some way. Mm-hmm. And we're also trying to manage money for, an indefinite period of time. We don't know when you're going to pass away, so it's uncertain. And that creates a lot of challenges that we don't have while you're working. Mm-hmm. Sequence of returns risk is a popular term that everyone talks about. While it does exist when you're saving for retirement, nobody really worries about it. You worry about it when you get to retirement. So there are new risks that pop up when you get to retirement that you otherwise haven't seen.
Well, a whole lot of people learned about sequence of returns back in 2008,
yeah.
when they were either just about to retire and ended up having to keep working if they were not laid off, or when they had already retired and all of a sudden had to tighten their belt so they didn't have to start selling stocks when they were down.
Yeah, and that's something that actually kind of goes almost all the way back to Bill Bengen's research, right? The 4% withdrawal rule, which was average returns don't really matter too much in retirement, right? It's actually the sequencing of those returns that's more important. So those really bad down years early in retirement wipe out a portfolio because all of a sudden you're drawing money out of something that's down 30 or 40% if we're looking back in 2008, 2009. It's hard to recover from that. It really doesn't matter how great of the investments do there on out. You've already done the damage early on. So we have to plan around that, have other, cash reserves, life insurance strategies, using reverse mortgages to kind of supplement income in down market years for any retiree that's usually choosing some type of volatile portfolio to generate income.
Now, I haven't read the book yet because you just gave me my copy this morning, but I know you said there's two basic themes in the book. One are different retirement income strategies, and I think you talk about three, and then some of the hurdles that people face. So could you share a little bit about the income strategies that you talk about?
Yeah, so I mostly focus on kind of the three main strategies that exist out there. Now, this is, kind of in one sense more of a theoretical way that we're going to discuss them, and then as you implement them you'll see that they kind of mix into each other.
Okay. So before you get into the details, just share real quickly what the three are.
Right.
And then after the break we can talk more about them in detail.
Yeah, so the most popular one is some type of systematic withdrawal strategy, pulling money out of investment portfolio. Another one is called a bucketing strategy. So we're going to separate assets for different time periods. And the third one is more of a flooring strategy. So building a level of guaranteed income that will sustain throughout retirement. And so those are really the three main strategies that people use.
Good. Well, I'm going to look forward to hearing more about that when we come back after a word from our sponsor. I'm Bill Borton. More Live Better Longer, back in a moment.
Everybody wants senior.
Welcome back to Live Better Longer. I'm your host, Bill Borton, here with Jamie Hopkins from the American College. So Jamie, before the break we were talking about the three different income strategies that you profile in Rewirement, your new book. So tell us about the withdrawal strategy, because this is the one that most people think about.
Yeah, so the withdrawal strategy is really where most people are moving to today. So what happened to Americans? We moved away from a pension system to more of a 401k savings system. So now you get to retirement with a bucket of money, right? You have your 401k IRA, and how do you generate income from that? Right, to make it last for a lifetime. So you have to take systematic withdrawals there, paying attention to a sustainable withdrawal rate, meaning how much can you spend from that each year and make it last for retirement. So there's a lot of different ways you can do that, but a lot of them are centered around something called the safe withdrawal rate. So back in the 90s, researcher Bill Bengen did research and said 4% is what you could safely spend from a portfolio 50-50 stock to bond historically in the US and make it last for 30 years. Now there's a lot of variations, but that gives us a starting point. That says if you're pulling 8-9% from your portfolio, it's probably not going to last 30 years, right? It's or at least there's some risk associated with that. But it doesn't mean 4%'s it. You can pick a higher number, especially if you're willing to cut back in down market years. Now, that's kind of the main system that's used today, but as we said, there are two other ones.
Okay. And so you mentioned the buckets. I've read about this also. So that's where you're basically putting assets figuratively or literally into three different buckets.
Yeah, and so that one actually fits a lot of the themes of my book well, that it's a way to change the kind of way you think about planning and financial decisions. That's close to mental accounting, right? We set aside assets for specific spending goals. So a lot of people do that. They say, this is my money that we're going to spend on vacation. Okay, well, money's really fungible. You use your best assets in the best way, but it helps people recognize why they're holding investment assets in retirement. Why do you have stocks? Because you know that there's risk associated with that. Well, that's your growth portfolio. That's out in the future. We're not going to spend them the next 5 years. That's going to grow. And then you have an intermediary bucket, which might be a mix of stocks and bonds. And then what's going to generate your income over the next couple years might be term certain annuities, might be bond laddering, might be CDs, might be tips, but something that generates secure income that you know is going to be there. And so you put those secure assets up front in retirement and you let your growth assets sit further out.
Now, of course, how you time all this has to do with how old you are and what your spending habits are and whether you're going to claim Social Security early or wait, depending on what you think about your life expectancy. So there's no hard and fast rules about the three buckets, but they're generally designed to coincide with what I know Tom Hegna and I think a couple of others talk about with the go-go years, the go-slow years, and the no-go years. Right? So people think that you're going to spend money evenly, but a lot of people spend more in the go-go years, slow down the spending in the go-slow years, and then spending in the no-go years can either be limited or it could really spike up because of long-term care.
Yeah, so that is an interesting concept, right? How do people spend throughout retirement? And it's not a straight line, right? What you do, there's a lot of data that shows that the first couple years of retirement, actually people spend more money than they were before retiring, right? They go on cruises, they buy new things, they might upsize in their house. There's a lot of spending kind of variations, right, in the first couple years. And then most people do dip down for a while in the middle of retirement, and then the end is kind of uncertain. Will there be a huge spike in costs because of long-term care, health care towards the end of your life? Maybe. That's a real risk that we need to think about. But for some people who die more suddenly, you actually won't really see that huge spike at the end. But as you mentioned, Social Security, right? Social Security really drives us to the third strategy, which is some type of flooring strategy. And that's really, what are the required expenses that you need through retirement, right? Housing, taxes, health care payments, and that instead of kind of setting up these different buckets, we say, look, here's the stuff we have to live independently in retirement. So let's go out and buy enough guaranteed income sources to build us a baseline of income, a floor of income. And part of Social Security is going to be in that floor. And if you had a pension, that pension would be in that floor. And then do you buy CDs, bonds, annuities to fill that in to make sure that you're never going to fall below your minimum needs in retirement.
And so this is why annuities, which is other than a pension or Social Security, is the only form of guaranteed lifetime income that you can buy, are becoming more popular. In fact, in investment news, there was just an article where Wade Pfau from the college and Michael Kitces both spoke positively about annuities and how dialing some guaranteed income into a portfolio can really provide that floor, which allows you to be able to A, sleep better, and B, to be able to invest a little more aggressively for the long haul.
Yeah, so because annuities do provide that guaranteed income, it does allow you to be a little bit more aggressive with your other assets, right? Because you have a safety net kind of built in. And if you are a little bit more aggressive on the other half, that actually, increases your likelihood your portfolio grows over the long run. So that's a positive thing for most individuals. Now, if you're a very risk-averse person, which comes back to the individual planning side of this, you might not feel comfortable putting more, in stocks. And that's okay too. But then you need to really do the planning and say, do I have enough money? Is my plan going to work for me? But taking into consideration risk tolerance is really important. And you'll see those more risk-averse people, right, move to a flooring strategy because it does have some guarantees built in.
So I was just about to ask if there's a best strategy out of the three, but something tells me that the three exist because there is no best strategy.
Yeah, the way I look at those three is they're the best for certain individuals. A very risk-tolerant person who's okay with market investments, they're going to gravitate more towards that systematic withdrawal portfolio because they're going to realize that, being invested in the market in the long run, it's likely that my assets will grow. Now, a person who's risk-averse and doesn't like that says, you know what? I don't think I'm going to floor. I think I'm going to build in guaranteed income, right? I don't want to worry how the market's doing in 12 years and how that impacts my retirement. And then the middle group is probably really useful in that bucketing strategy for people who struggle understanding why you're doing things the way you are for retirement planning. You actually could be using a similar strategy to either the flooring or the systematic withdrawal, but the way you describe it is a bucketing strategy. And that works very emotionally and behaviorally well for individuals.
Now, it's probably counterintuitive, but I'm guessing that using home equity or reverse mortgages probably would apply most effectively in the withdrawal strategy, again, because of being able to manage sequence of returns risk.
Yeah, and I think the home equity one is really kind of underserved today. I discussed it in my book. We teach it in the RICP program. It's been part of the college for a while, but advisors don't spend a lot of time on it. And individuals don't think about their home as a retirement income source. They think about it mostly as a legacy asset, that it's something they're going to leave to their kids. And if you've worked in the world, right, you realize that the kids don't want the house. They might want the value of the house, but not the house. So I actually think the house fits in any of the three strategies, but where most of the research has been around in here has been about using home equity reverse mortgages to support a sustainable withdrawal strategy. So using that home equity and reverse mortgage in down market years, drawing from your home, instead of selling assets when they're down 30–40%. And I always think that always resonates with people, right? Would I rather borrow at 4.5% or sell assets that are down 40%? Well, we know that math is going to work out, right?
Well, I want to think about that a while.
Yeah. Which one do you want? Sell something down 40% or borrow at 4.5%, right? And that's kind of one of the underlying reasons why the research there has shown, right, that using home equity coordinated with your other assets, right? And really that's just a holistic approach to planning, is making sure you use all of your financial assets in the most efficient way possible to sustain your lifestyle. It's nothing more than that. We use all the other assets, bonds, CDs, annuities, insurance products, investments together, right? Holistic planning is better. Including home equity into that conversation is just better. And that's what we've seen time and time again, including research from MIT, Dr. Wade Pfau, John Salter at Texas Tech, Barry Sachs. We've seen this all across the board now for about 7–8 years, really looking at how do you incorporate home equity and withdrawal strategies.
Well, I'm looking forward to talking more about the planning process when we come back after a word from our sponsors. I'm Bill Borton with Live Better Longer.
Today for the building you need and save as much as half the cost and time of conventional construction.
Welcome back to Live Better Longer. I'm your host, Bill Borton, here with Jamie Hopkins from the American College. So Jamie, why do people need help with retirement income planning?
Yeah, well, the first part is not that easy. But the second part is that really most people aren't equipped to do this, right? They haven't spent their lives studying, retirement income finances, right, and retirement income decisions. They haven't made decisions about Social Security, Medicare. They haven't made decisions about what's a sustainable portfolio yet. Why? Because they've never lived through retirement yet. They're really good probably at saving at this point. They've had a long time of learning how to put assets away and automate that as best as possible. But automating retirement income planning is kind of hard, and you probably need help with that. The other thing that we started off the show talking about is misconceptions, right? Behavioral biases that people have, that they think that they're smarter than they are, that they're risk averse. All of those things do create hurdles that we really need help to overcome. We just can't do those things by ourselves, which is why we hire advisors and teams of advisors to step in. And I think that's really where the world is moving towards, right, is more of a team-oriented approach here, right? Again, you have behavioral biases and misconceptions, and you make poor planning decisions. We know that a lot of individuals don't do a great job managing finances. So they need help, and they don't have the knowledge or skill set really for retirement income planning, which could be more challenging than what they've done before.
Well, we recall back in January when you and Dave invited me into the studio at the college to see some videos about long-term care. We also shot one about my practice model, where I incorporate retirement risk management and income planning and collaborate with fee-only investment advisors who don't sell or manage insurance or annuities, and let them specialize in wealth management while I specialize in risk management. That's two legs of the stool.
Yeah.
Then you also need tax planning and you need legal planning and documents. So a four-legged stool stands a lot better than a three, and except most people, if they have a stool at all, they try to have it stand on only 2 or 3 legs.
Yeah, and some people might have just one leg too, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you really need all those skill sets together. Now, obviously, there are firms that might bring all of that into one one firm and do all that. But again, there's going to be different skills. You really can't be an expert in all things. You can be an expert in certain areas, but maybe you're the expert in the quarterbacking of the team, right? You run the team, you figure out who you need to get and what skills. But you absolutely need those, right? There's no good retirement plan that doesn't have legal as part of it. You need wills, powers of attorney. A lot of people need trusts nowadays, especially depending on what state you live in, right? We need risk management. Risk management's important. It was important your whole life getting to retirement. It doesn't stop being important in retirement, whether that's long-term care planning, health insurance, Medicare decisions, longevity risk, all that's important. And then managing the general financial plan as things change. One of my favorite quotes from myself, right, is that retirement income planning is like hitting a moving target in the wind, right? Because the target's moving back, it's moving forward. We don't know how long your retirement's going to be. You're probably not going to retire on the exact day that you always thought you were going to retire. It's probably going to be a little early, a little later. You could retire when you want, but that's not the most likely scenario. And then we don't know when you're going to pass away. If we knew exactly the date of retirement and your date of death, retirement income planning gets a lot easier, but it's not. It's moving back and forth. And I say that there's wind because things change, right? The market's going to change. Global financial decisions are going to change, right? How China's interacting with the rest of the world changes things. It's going to change investments. All of a sudden sectors that you invest in become more correlated with each other and you have to change your plan. Then your own decisions change. What you care about will change through retirement. It's not going to be the same day one as it is 30 years later. Those are going to feel different. Tax laws change, right? So your plan has to be at least nimble enough to make some changes, right? A strict plan that's just going to go from point A to point B without any flexibility, you're not going to hit the target, right? You have to adjust for those changes.
So I think the one takeaway that I'm hoping that all of our viewers will understand from our conversation is that in order to really be able to successfully get to the end of a long life and be able to live the way that you hoped that you would all those years when you were growing your assets, you need to be able to understand what your biases are and where they come from. You need to understand what blind spots you may have, and you also need to know who it is you should be working with. So I guess my last question is, how would you select a financial advisor? What words of advice would you give someone?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to go there. I always tell people one of the first things I do is look for education. I wouldn't hire an attorney that didn't go to law school. I wouldn't hire a doctor that didn't go to med school. So I wouldn't really hire a financial planner that has no education in financial planning. Now, they can come from a lot of different avenues, but I would want some educational background. So CFP, CHFC, CLU, RICP, CFA, some credentials that say, I'm committed to the industry, I'm committed to learning, lifelong learning. That's important to me. I also want to know about how they're compensated. Now, there's a lot of different compensation models, and a lot of them work, for different purposes, but they can all be useful, but you need to feel comfortable with it. And then lastly, you need to make sure, what is their philosophy on planning? Does that align with your philosophy, right? So you want to ask them about that. How do you see generating income for us in retirement? How do you see working with us throughout our lives? Those are important questions to ask. And I think, eventually, most people make decisions on getting a recommendation from one of their friends or family members on who they used, and that's important. You always have to be able to trust the person. They're handling your finances. So whatever measurements you need to use to determine trust is important. If you don't feel comfortable with your advisor, it's okay to switch. I often get that question that says, I don't feel comfortable with them, I don't know what they're doing. It's okay to switch. It doesn't mean they're doing a bad job. It just means that what they're doing isn't aligning with what you want. So then make a change. That's okay.
Well, the advisor that got you there isn't necessarily the one that's going to be able to help you, again, figure out how to spend the money once you've saved the money.
Yeah, absolutely. So not every advisor specializes in income planning. Some specialize in wealth management accumulation side, but don't use risk management products, annuities, don't have systematic withdrawal portfolios set up. So you might need to make a change as your needs change.
And I guess you always want to watch out for the people that use the words like always and never. Because we don't live in a black and white world.
Right.
There wouldn't be all these different kinds of products and strategies if they weren't all valid. At any rate, Jamie, thank you for being on the show. Jamie's book, Rewirement, I would recommend that anybody who's even considering retirement anytime soon in their lives get a copy of this book and read it. Jamie, thanks so much for being on Live Better Longer. I'm your host, Bill Borton. I'll see you again next